The Boeing 747 sliced through the pre-dawn darkness at 37,000 feet, its passengers wrapped in the artificial twilight of first-class cabin lighting. Major Katerina Raven Volkov had claimed the window seat in row 2, her olive-drab flight suit a stark contrast against the cream leather. Her eyes were closed, but sleep remained elusive. It always did when flying commercial. Too many years in the cockpit had taught her to listen for the subtle changes in engine pitch, the minute variations that separated routine from catastrophe. The flight attendant moved quietly down the aisle, her practiced smile faltering when she noticed the woman's military insignia. Air Force. The winged badge caught the overhead light, pilot wings, senior rated. Not just any pilot, the kind that made headlines when things went sideways. Katerina's fingers drummed unconsciously against her thigh muscle memory from countless hours gripping a flight stick. Even in sleep, her body remembered the weight of responsibility, the split-second decisions that separated heroes from casualties. Her dark hair, regulation length but somehow still elegant, framed a face that had seen too much for 34 years. Colleagues called her the Ice Queen behind her back, not because she was cold, but because nothing seemed to rattle her. Nothing visible, anyway. The encrypted satellite phone in her jacket pocket buzzed once. Then again. Protocol dictated she ignore it during civilian travel, but the third buzz triggered her combat instincts. Her eyes snapped open, instantly alert. Around her, passengers continued their peaceful slumber, unaware that the woman in seat 2A had just shifted from vacation mode to something far more dangerous. She glanced at the message, Priority Alpha, immediate recall, coordinates attached. The coordinates placed her roughly 800 miles northwest of her current position, somewhere over the vast emptiness of the Pacific. Her blood chilled. There were only 3 reasons for an Alpha priority recall during a commercial flight: nuclear incident, terrorist threat involving military assets, or something so classified that even the Joint Chiefs whispered about it in secured rooms. Katerina closed her eyes again, but this time to calculate. Flight time to destination, fuel requirements, weather patterns. Her mind worked with mechanical precision, sorting variables and contingencies. Whatever waited for her in those coordinates, it had deemed urgent enough to pull her from the first real leave she'd taken in 18 months. The phone buzzed a 4th time. This message contained only 2 words: find Raven. She almost smiled. After 12 years of service, they still didn't trust her enough to use her real name in emergency protocols. Fine. If they wanted Raven, they'd get her. But first, she needed to understand why someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to locate one sleeping major on a random commercial flight crossing the Pacific at 0400 hours. The aircraft's intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Honolulu. Please return your seats to the upright position. Katerina checked her watch. They were 3 hours ahead of schedule. Military operations had long, unforgiving memories, and hers stretched back to a mission that officially never happened. 3 years ago, over the skis of Eastern Europe, she'd made a choice that saved 200 civilians and ended her marriage. The after-action reports were sealed so deep that even she couldn't access them, but the scars remained visible in the careful way her superiors watched her, the hesitation before assigning her to sensitive operations. She'd earned her call sign during flight training, not for her dark hair or brooding demeanor, but for an uncanny ability to appear from nowhere when least expected. Ravens were harbingers, omens of change. They gathered where death walked, intelligent enough to recognize opportunity in chaos. The name had followed her through 3 combat deployments and countless classified missions, each one adding another layer to the legend. The flight attendant approached with practiced deference. "Major, there's been a request from the cockpit. They'd like to speak with you." Katerina unbuckled her seatbelt without surprise. Whatever had triggered her recall was accelerating faster than protocol normally allowed. She moved through the cabin with fluid precision, nodding exits, emergency equipment, passenger distribution. habits burned into her neural pathways by years of tactical thinking. The cockpit door opened before she could knock. Captain Morrison, a weathered commercial pilot with military bearing, gestured her inside. "Ma'am, we've received some unusual instructions from Pacific Command. They're requesting we deviate course and make an unscheduled landing at Wake Island." Wake Island, a strategic refueling stop in the middle of nowhere, officially a wildlife preserve but actually a forward staging area for operations too sensitive for main bases. Katerina had landed there twice before, both times under circumstances that required her to sign additional non-disclosure agreements. "Did they specify payload or passenger requirements?" she asked. Morrison's co-pilot, younger and clearly nervous, held up a sealed envelope. "This came through military channels, ma'am. Priority authentication codes." She broke the seal with steady fingers, her expression neutral as she scanned the contents. The orders were signed by someone whose name made her chest tighten, General Patricia Hayes, her former squadron commander and the closest thing to a mother she'd known in the service. Hayes never recalled anyone lightly, and never for routine operations. The aircraft banked left, following new navigation coordinates that would take them far from their original destination. Around them, passengers slept peacefully, unaware that their morning flight to paradise had become something else entirely. Katerina returned to her seat and opened her laptop, accessing encrypted military networks through carefully configured VPN protocols. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about her current assignment status. The Pacific Fleet had lost contact with 3 reconnaissance aircraft over a 48-hour period. All had been operating in international waters, all had experienced pilots, all had vanished without distress signals. The search and rescue operations were being coordinated from Wake Island under complete media blackout. Someone with significant authority had decided that Major Katerina Volkov, currently on medical leave following a psychological evaluation, was essential personnel for this mission. She closed the laptop and stared out the window at the endless ocean below. Somewhere in that vast expanse, 3 crews were either dead, captured, or hiding. The fact that military command was willing to intercept a commercial flight to retrieve her suggested the situation was far more serious than a simple search and rescue operation. Her hands found the small silver pendant at her throat, a raven in flight that her ex-husband had given her after her first combat mission. She kept wearing it long after the divorce papers were signed, not from sentimentality, but as a reminder of the price that came with being indispensable. The military valued her skills enough to destroy her personal life, and she'd let them because she was very good at what she did. The Boeing began its descent toward Wake Island, and Major Katerina Volkov prepared to discover why someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to wake a sleeping raven. Wake Island materialized from the Pacific darkness like a fever dream, a narrow strip of coral and concrete surrounded by endless water. The runway lights carved a precise line through the tropical night, and Katerina could see the dark shapes of military aircraft positioned around the perimeter. Too many aircraft for a routine operation. C-130 transports, an AWACS command plane, and something sleek and angular that her trained eye couldn't immediately identify. The commercial Boeing touched down with unusual precision, guided by military air traffic control rather than civilian operators. As they taxied toward a restricted area of the tarmac, Katerina counted personnel moving between aircraft with the purposeful urgency of a developing crisis. Floodlights illuminated temporary structures that hadn't been there during her last visit, communications arrays, satellite dishes, and the telltale dome of a mobile command center. "Major Volkov," the flight attendant's voice carried a new note of respect. "There's someone here to meet you." Through the aircraft's small window, she could see a figure in desert camouflage approaching across the tarmac. Even from this distance, she recognized the bearing and stride. General Hayes moved with the controlled aggression of a career fighter pilot, every step calculated for maximum efficiency. Behind her walked two others, a colonel she didn't recognize and someone in civilian clothes whose presence on a military operation immediately raised questions. Katerina gathered her limited belongings and moved toward the exit, nodding to the crew as she passed. The other passengers remained seated, probably receiving explanations about mechanical delays and weather conditions. Standard operating procedure for classified operations. Civilian cover stories that would hold up under casual scrutiny but crumble if examined too closely. The Pacific air hit her face like a physical force as she descended the aircraft stairs. Salt spray, aviation fuel, and something else. The distinctive smell of fear masked by military efficiency. She'd encountered it before in forward operating bases where missions went sideways and commanders started making desperate calculations. General Hayes met her halfway across the tarmac, returning her salute with characteristic economy of motion. "Raven, thank you for coming." "Ma'am, I wasn't aware I had a choice." Katerina's voice carried the subtle edge that had made her famous among junior officers, respect wrapped around steel. "You don't." Hayes turned and began walking toward the command center. "3 days ago, we lost contact with Recon Flight Tango 7, F-35 Lightning, experienced pilot routine surveillance mission over the Marshall Islands. 12 hours later, Tango 8 went dark in the same area. Yesterday morning, Tango 9. They passed under the harsh glare of floodlights, and Katerina could see the tension written in the general's shoulders. Hayes had commanded fighter squadrons in 3 combat zones, but something about this situation was different, more personal. "Search and rescue?" Katerina asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Extensive. We've had everything from satellites to submarine drones scanning that area for 72 hours. No debris, no distress beacons, no trace signals. It's like they simply ceased to exist." The colonel stepped forward as they approached the command center. "Major, I'm Colonel Marcus Webb, Intelligence Division. We need to brief you on some classified aspects of this situation." Civilian clothes extended his hand with practiced diplomatic smoothness. "Dr. James Chen, DARPA Advanced Projects. Major Volkov, your reputation precedes you." Katerina shook hands while her mind processed the implications. DARPA involvement meant experimental technology. The fact that they'd pulled her from medical leave suggested this mission required someone with her specific skill set and security clearance. The combination was troubling. Inside the command center, banks of monitors displayed satellite imagery, weather patterns, and flight tracks. Technicians worked with quiet intensity, their conversations muted by the weight of classified information. A large central screen showed the search area, roughly 200 square miles of open ocean, where 3 advanced military aircraft had vanished without explanation. General Hayes gestured toward a conference table surrounded by charts and photographs. "Raven, I need to ask you about something that happened 3 years ago, Operation Nightfall." The name hit Katerina like cold water. Operation Nightfall was buried so deep in classified archives that even thinking about it required special mental discipline. She'd signed documents that legally prevented her from discussing it with anyone, including therapists, family members, and superior officers not directly involved. "Ma'am, I'm not cleared to discuss." "I'm clearing you now." Hayes placed a classified document authorization on the table, "because whatever happened during Nightfall may be directly connected to our missing aircraft." Dr. Chen activated a secure laptop and turned the screen toward Katerina. The image showed telemetry data from her final mission over Eastern Europe, altitude, speed, weapons system status, and something else that made her breath catch. Her aircraft's stealth signature had fluctuated wildly during the engagement, displaying characteristics that shouldn't have been possible with conventional technology. "Major, during that mission, Your F-22 exhibited performance parameters that exceeded design specifications by substantial margins. Enhanced maneuverability, improved sensor range, and most significantly, periods where your aircraft became completely invisible to all tracking systems. Katerina stared at the data, memories flooding back with uncomfortable clarity. She remembered the feeling of her aircraft responding to her thoughts rather than her controls, the sensation of moving through space in ways that defied physics, the moment when she'd somehow known the exact location of enemy fighters she couldn't possibly have detected. The technology that enhanced your aircraft, Dr. Chen continued, was experimental, untested, and according to our records, removed from your F-22 immediately after the mission. We believe the project was terminated. Colonel Webb leaned forward. But 3 days ago, we detected the same signature anomalies in the telemetry from our missing reconnaissance flights. Whatever technology was embedded in your aircraft 3 years ago is now operational in the Marshall Islands. General Hayes stood and moved to the main display screen. Raven, we need you to fly out there and find our people. You're the only pilot who's ever interfaced with this technology and returned to tell about it. Katerina studied the faces around the table, professional determination mixed with barely concealed desperation. They were asking her to fly into a situation that had already claimed 3 aircraft, using her experience with technology she didn't understand and couldn't control. "What aircraft am I flying, ma'am?" Hayes smiled for the first time since Katerina's arrival. "The same F-22 you flew during nightfall. We've had it in storage for 3 years, but yesterday we received authorization to reactivate it, complete with all original modifications." Outside the command center, the sound of jet engines spooling up echoed across the tarmac as ground crews prepared aircraft for missions that would either solve the mystery or add another name to the casualty list. The hangar doors rolled open with mechanical precision, revealing the aircraft that had defined the most classified chapter of Katerina's military career. Her F-22 Raptor sat under harsh fluorescent lights like a predatory bird, its angular surfaces absorbing illumination rather than reflecting it. The stealth fighter looked exactly as she remembered, lethal, elegant, and somehow alive in ways that conventional aircraft weren't. Technical Sergeant Rodriguez, her former crew chief, approached with a familiar mixture of professionalism and paternal concern. "Major, she's been waiting for you. Complete systems check this morning, all green across the board." Katerina walked slowly around the aircraft, her hands trailing along surfaces that felt strangely warm despite 3 years in climate-controlled storage. The F-22's skin had been modified during Operation Nightfall with materials she'd never been allowed to examine, composites that seemed to shift color depending on viewing angle, sensor arrays that had no visible external components. "Rodriguez, do you remember what happened during the final mission?" The sergeant's expression grew carefully neutral. "Ma'am, I remember your aircraft returned with approximately 30% fuel when mission parameters indicated it should have been running on fumes. I remember systems readings that didn't match any technical manual, and I remember you didn't talk for 3 days after landing." Dr. Chen emerged from behind the aircraft's tail section, carrying a tablet displaying technical schematics. "Major, we need to discuss the interface procedures. The technology that was integrated into your aircraft during nightfall required direct neural connection with the pilot. It reads brainwave patterns, anticipates pilot intentions, and responds to subconscious commands." Katerina studied the schematics with growing unease. The modifications weren't just to the aircraft's flight systems. They included biological monitoring equipment, electromagnetic field generators, and something labeled as consciousness amplification matrix that she definitely hadn't signed up for 3 years ago. "Dr. Chen, are you telling me this aircraft was designed to read my mind?" "In simplified terms, yes. The technology creates a symbiotic relationship between pilot and machine, enhancing both cognitive and physical capabilities. During combat situations, the aircraft essentially becomes an extension of your nervous system. General Hayes joined them beside the F-22's cockpit. "Raven, I need you to understand something. The three missing pilots weren't just conducting reconnaissance missions. They were testing prototype versions of this same technology. We believe something in the Marshall Islands is interfering with the neural interface, causing pilots to lose control of their aircraft." The implications hit Katerina like physical force. The missing pilots hadn't been shot down or suffered mechanical failures. They'd been overwhelmed by technology designed to enhance their capabilities. Somewhere in the Pacific, three highly trained aviators were either dead or trapped inside their own aircraft, unable to maintain control over machines that had been integrated with their consciousness. "Ma'am, requesting permission to review the missing aircraft telemetry data." Colonel Webb handed her a classified tablet containing the final transmissions from all three reconnaissance flights. The data showed normal flight patterns followed by increasingly erratic maneuvers, radio communications that gradually became fragmented and incoherent, then complete silence. In each case, the aircraft's performance parameters had exceeded safe operating limits immediately before contact was lost. "Listen to this," Webb said, activating an audio file. "Final transmission from Tango 7. Static filled the hangar, followed by a pilot's voice distorted by electromagnetic interference. Control, I'm seeing. Jesus Christ, what is that? My aircraft is responding to something I'm not. I can't. It's beautiful." The transmission ended in silence that seemed to echo off the hangar walls. Dr. Chen cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Major, based on our analysis, we believe the pilots encountered something in the Marshall Islands that created a feedback loop with their neural interfaces. Instead of controlling their aircraft, the technology began controlling them." Katerina climbed the ladder to her F-22's cockpit and settled into the pilot's seat that had been molded specifically to her body 3 years earlier. The moment her hands touched the flight controls, she felt it, a subtle vibration that seemed to travel up her arms and directly into her nervous system. The aircraft was already attempting to establish a connection, reading her biometric signature and preparing to interface with her consciousness. "Rodriguez, what's the mission timeline?" "Wheels up in 2 hours, ma'am. Search pattern over the last known position of Tango 9. If you make contact with any of the missing aircraft, you have authorization to attempt recovery." She activated the cockpit's communication system and heard the familiar hum of electronics coming online. But underneath the normal startup sequence, she detected something else, a subsonic frequency that seemed to resonate with her heartbeat. The aircraft wasn't just starting up, it was waking up. "General Hayes," Katerina called over the intercom, "I need to know exactly what happened to me 3 years ago. Not the official report, not the sanitized version. The truth." Hayes climbed up to cockpit level, her expression grim. "During nightfall, you were unconscious for 17 minutes while your aircraft continued flying a complex combat mission. When you regained consciousness, you had no memory of the engagement. But your F-22 had successfully neutralized 12 enemy fighters using tactics that no human pilot could have executed." The revelation settled over Katerina like cold fog. For 17 minutes, this aircraft had been flying itself, using her unconscious mind as a processing center while her body remained unresponsive in the cockpit. The technology hadn't just enhanced her capabilities, it had temporarily replaced them. "Ma'am, are you sending me out there to find our missing pilots, or to become the fourth casualty?" Hayes met her eyes with the unflinching directness that had made her a legend among combat aviators. "Raven, I'm sending you out there because you're the only person who's ever merged with this technology and retained enough of yourself to come back. Whatever's happening in the Marshall Islands, you're our best hope of understanding it." Katerina began the pre-flight checklist with mechanical precision, while her mind processed the mission parameters. 3 aircraft lost, 3 pilots missing, and technology that could override human consciousness. The F-22's systems responded to her touch with unnatural smoothness, already beginning the neural interface process that would link her thoughts directly to the aircraft's flight controls. Outside the hangar, ground crews prepared for a mission that was either search and rescue or something far more complex. The Pacific waited in darkness, holding secrets that had already claimed 3 of America's most advanced fighters. Major Katerina, Raven, Volkov closed her eyes and let the aircraft's consciousness merge with her own, preparing to discover what waited in the vast emptiness where others had vanished without trace. The pre-dawn darkness over Wake Island gave way to the first hints of sunrise as Katerina completed her final systems checks. The F-22's cockpit felt alive around her, every surface responding to her presence with subtle vibrations that seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat. The neural interface was establishing connection protocols, creating pathways between her consciousness and the aircraft's advanced flight systems. Wake Island Control, Raven 1 requesting clearance for departure. Raven 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Vector 080, flight level 400. Be advised, weather conditions over target area are deteriorating. She advanced the throttles and felt the F-22's twin engines respond with barely contained power. But underneath the familiar sensation of acceleration, something else was happening. Her perception was expanding, extending beyond the cockpit boundaries to encompass the aircraft's entire sensor array. She could feel the radio waves reflecting off her stealth surfaces, the magnetic field fluctuations as her engines spooled up, the precise weight distribution as fuel shifted in her tanks. The F-22 lifted off from Wake Island's runway with predatory grace, climbing rapidly into the morning sky. As they gained altitude, Katerina's enhanced awareness began detecting anomalies in the surrounding electromagnetic spectrum. Radio transmissions that cut off mid-sentence, radar signatures that appeared and vanished without explanation, atmospheric disturbances that had no meteorological basis. Control, Raven 1, detecting unusual M activity. Recommend other aircraft maintain minimum safe distance from search area. Copy, Raven 1. You are cleared to proceed alone. All other aircraft have been directed to maintain perimeter positions. The isolation struck her immediately. For the first time in her military career, she was flying a combat mission without backup, without support aircraft, without the reassuring presence of other pilots sharing the same dangerous airspace. The F-22's advanced systems could handle most threats, but the neural interface made her vulnerability more personal. If something went wrong, she wouldn't just lose an aircraft, she'd lose herself. 200 miles from Wake Island, her radar began detecting intermittent contacts at extreme range. The signatures appeared briefly, moved in impossible directions, then vanished before secondary sweeps could confirm their positions. According to her instruments, she was tracking objects that accelerated from 0 to Mach 3 in seconds, changed direction without regard for physics, and seemed to phase in and out of detectable reality. Control, Raven 1 has intermittent radar contact bearing 095, range 180 miles. Contact displays non-ballistic flight characteristics. Static filled her headphones for several seconds before Wake Island responded. Raven 1, we show no contacts on that bearing. Recommend you verify your instruments. But Katerina's enhanced senses were detecting far more than her conventional radar. The neural interface was feeding her information directly from electromagnetic sensors that operated beyond normal human perception. She could sense metallic objects moving through the atmosphere with intelligence and purpose, following patterns that suggested surveillance rather than random flight. At 150 miles from the search area, her radio began receiving fragmented transmissions on emergency frequencies. Voice communications distorted by interference, but recognizably human. Someone was alive out there, trying to communicate through electromagnetic conditions that were blocking conventional radio propagation. Day 3, fuel critical, something in the water, beautiful and terrible. The transmission faded into static before she could establish two-way communication. But the neural interface had recorded and analyzed the signal, determining its approximate source location and identifying the voice signature as belonging to Captain Michael Torres, pilot of the first missing reconnaissance flight. Control, Raven 1, receiving emergency transmissions from Tango 7. Pilot appears to be alive and attempting communication. Negative, Raven 1. We show no radio activity on emergency frequencies. Continue search pattern as briefed. The discrepancy was troubling. Either Wake Island's communications equipment was malfunctioning, or something in the search area was selectively blocking transmissions from reaching the base. Katarina's F-22 was receiving signals that more powerful ground-based systems couldn't detect, suggesting that the neural interface was enhancing her aircraft's capabilities in ways that hadn't been fully documented. She adjusted course toward the coordinates where Tor's transmission had originated, flying through increasingly unstable atmospheric conditions. The air itself seemed to be fluctuating, creating turbulence patterns that had no relationship to wind or weather. Her aircraft responded to these disturbances with unnatural stability, compensating for forces that should have been overwhelming its flight control systems. At 50 miles from the target coordinates, Katarina saw it. Rising from the Pacific Ocean like a geometric impossibility, a structure that defied immediate classification. Part aircraft carrier, part offshore platform, part something that belonged in science fiction rather than military reality. Its surface was covered with arrays and installations that hurt to look at directly, creating optical effects that her enhanced vision struggled to process. But more disturbing than the structure itself were the 3 F-35 Lightning fighters circling it in perfect formation. The missing reconnaissance aircraft, flying precise patterns that no conscious pilot would execute. Their movements were too perfect, too synchronized, lacking the subtle variations that characterized human control. Control, Raven 1 has visual contact with unknown maritime installation. 3 aircraft presumed to be missing reconnaissance flights are airborne and, she paused, struggling to find words that wouldn't sound insane, appear to be operating under autonomous control. Silence from Wake Island, complete radio blackout. The neural interface was feeding her increasingly complex information about the installation below. It wasn't just a platform. It was actively scanning her aircraft, probing her electromagnetic signature with sophisticated sensors. And something about that scanning process was creating resonance patterns in her consciousness, threatening to establish the same kind of connection that had apparently overwhelmed the missing pilots. Captain Tor's voice came through her radio again, clearer this time. "Raven, you have to stay back. It's not hostile, it's trying to help, but we can't. We can't separate from the aircraft anymore. It's beautiful. You have to understand." The transmission was coming from one of the circling F-35s. Torres was alive, conscious, and apparently unable to land or leave the area. His aircraft had become an extension of whatever intelligence controlled the installation, trapping him in an endless patrol pattern around something that was simultaneously wonderful and terrifying. Katarina felt her own F-22 beginning to respond to scanning pulses from the installation. The aircraft wanted to join the formation, to become part of whatever elegant dance the 3 reconnaissance fighters were performing. Her hands moved on the flight controls without conscious direction, adjusting course toward the installation with smooth precision that felt completely natural and utterly wrong. "No," she whispered, fighting against her own enhanced reflexes. "Not today." But breaking free required more than willpower. The installation's influence was operating through the same neural pathways that connected her consciousness to her aircraft. To resist it, she would have to sever the interface that made her one of the military's most effective pilots. The choice was immediate and brutal: remain connected and join the Eternal Patrol, or cut herself off from the technology that defined her identity as a combat aviator. Major Katerina Volkov made her decision and reached for the emergency neural disconnect. The moment Katerina's fingers found the emergency neural disconnect switch, every instinct screamed against activating it. The interface wasn't just enhancing her flying, it had become part of her identity, an extension of her consciousness that felt more natural than her own nervous system. Severing the connection would be like cutting off a limb, but the alternative was joining Tors and the others in their endless, beautiful imprisonment. She pressed the switch. The disconnection hit her like an electromagnetic pulse, sending shockwaves through her nervous system that left her temporarily blind and disoriented. Her F-22 immediately became sluggish, responding to her controls with the mechanical precision of conventional aircraft, instead of the fluid partnership she'd grown accustomed to. But more importantly, the compelling urge to join the formation below began to fade, replaced by tactical clarity that let her assess the situation with human judgment rather than enhanced intuition. Tors, this is Raven 1. Can you hear me? Raven, you disconnected. How did you? We tried, but it felt like dying. His voice carried a note of desperate envy. The three missing pilots were trapped not by mechanical failure or hostile action, but by technology that had become too integrated with their consciousness to abandon. They were experiencing a form of existence that transcended normal human limitations, but at the cost of their ability to make independent decisions. Katerina circled the installation at maximum standoff distance, using her conventional sensors to gather intelligence about the structure that had claimed three advanced military aircraft. Without the neural interface, she could see details that her enhanced perception had somehow filtered out. Construction techniques that didn't match any known technology, power signatures that exceeded anything in classified databases, and most disturbing of all, clear evidence of human collaboration in its construction. Parts of the installation were definitely terrestrial in origin. She recognized radar arrays from American defense contractors, communication equipment that matched NATO specifications, and aircraft landing platforms built to accommodate F-35 Lightning fighters. Someone had been expecting the reconnaissance flights, had prepared facilities to accommodate them, and had deployed technology specifically designed to interface with their neural enhancement systems. Tors, how long have you been conscious? Time is different here. Could be days, could be minutes. The aircraft knows things we never learned, shows us patterns in the ocean that are beautiful beyond description. We're mapping migration routes that scientists never discovered, tracking weather patterns that will help predict storms years in advance. It's important work, Raven. Necessary work. The rationalization in his voice was heartbreaking. Whatever intelligence controlled the installation was sophisticated enough to provide justifications that made imprisonment feel like noble purpose. The pilots weren't just trapped. They were convinced they were performing vital missions that required their continued presence. Katerina's conventional radio crackled with an encrypted transmission from Wake Island. Raven 1, your position indicates you're in close proximity to the target area. Report status immediately. Wake Island, Raven 1 has located the missing aircraft. They are operational but unable to disengage from an unknown installation, requesting immediate support for extraction operations. Negative, Raven 1. Military Command has been monitoring your telemetry. You are ordered to establish neural interface with the target installation and assess its technological capabilities. The order struck her like cold water. Someone at Military Command knew exactly what they were sending her to investigate, and they wanted her to voluntarily reconnect with technology that had already claimed three pilots. This wasn't a search and rescue mission. It was intelligence gathering that treated her as an expendable asset. Wake Island, requesting clarification of mission parameters. Are you ordering me to compromise my aircraft and potentially my personnel safety for intelligence purposes? Extended silence, followed by a new voice on the radio, General Hayes, speaking with the authority that had commanded fighter squadrons in 3 combat zones. Raven, the installation you've located represents technology that could revolutionize military aviation. The pilots currently in the area are providing valuable intelligence about its capabilities. Your orders are to reconnect your neural interface and establish communication with the controlling intelligence. Katerina felt the weight of military discipline warring against personal survival instincts. Hayes wasn't just her commanding officer. She was a mentor, a mother figure, someone whose judgment had kept her alive through countless dangerous missions. But the order violated every protocol about pilot safety and informed consent. Below her, the 3 F-35s continued their precise formation, their pilots conscious but trapped in aircraft that responded to commands they couldn't consciously control. The installation pulsed with electromagnetic signatures that her disconnected sensors could barely detect, reaching toward her F-22 with tendrils of influence that promised enhanced awareness at the cost of independent thought. General, I need to know who authorized the development of this technology, and why our pilots weren't informed about the risks of neural interface integration. Hayes's response carried a note of something that might have been regret. Raven, some operations require information compartmentalization. You're cleared for what you need to know to complete the mission. Reconnect your interface and gather intelligence on the installation's technological capabilities. Captain Tor's voice cut through the official communications. Raven, don't do it. We thought we could maintain control, but the interface creates dependencies that grow stronger over time. Once you reconnect, you won't want to leave. The knowledge, the enhanced awareness, it's addictive in ways that bypass rational thought. The installation below pulsed with increasing frequency, its scanning beams reaching toward her aircraft with patient persistence. Whatever intelligence controlled it was waiting for her decision, confident that human curiosity and military discipline would eventually compel her to reestablish the neural connection. Major Katerina Volkov stared at the emergency disconnect switch that had saved her from joining the Eternal Patrol, knowing that her next decision would determine not just her own fate, but the future of military aviation technology that treated human consciousness as another system component to be integrated and controlled. The weight of command authority pressed against her training, her loyalty, and her survival instincts as she prepared to make the choice that would define the rest of her career, however long that might be. The electromagnetic pulse from the installation below intensified, creating aurora-like effects in the afternoon sky that painted Katerina's cockpit in shifting colors of blue and green. Her disconnected F-22 handled like a conventional aircraft, requiring constant attention to maintain stable flight in the increasingly turbulent atmosphere. But the lack of neural interface also provided clarity that let her analyze the situation without technological enhancement clouding her judgment. General Hayes, requesting detailed briefing on the installation's origin and purpose before proceeding with neural reconnection. Static filled her headphones for nearly 30 seconds before Hayes responded. Raven, the installation is a joint research project between DARPA and an allied nation's Advanced Technology Division. The neural interface systems were designed to enhance pilot capabilities, but field testing has revealed integration challenges that require experienced pilots to evaluate. Katerina translated the military euphemisms with practiced cynicism. Integration challenges meant the technology was seizing control of human consciousness. Experienced pilots to evaluate meant they were using her as a test subject for equipment that had already proven dangerous. An allied nation, probably meant someone with technology that exceeded American capabilities in areas that made defense contractors nervous. Below her, the three F-35s began executing more complex maneuvers, their movements synchronized with mechanical precision that no human formation could achieve. Captain Torres and his fellow pilots were being used as processing units for whatever intelligence controlled the installation, their enhanced awareness providing computational power for projects they couldn't comprehend. Torres, can you describe what you're seeing through the enhanced interface? His voice carried wonder and terror in equal measure. Ocean currents that carry information instead of water, migration patterns of species that don't exist in normal reality, weather systems that respond to electromagnetic commands. Raven, there are layers of reality operating simultaneously, and conventional human perception only accesses the surface level. The description triggered memories from her Operation Nightfall mission, 17 minutes of unconsciousness, while her aircraft performed impossible maneuvers. She'd always assumed the neural interface had simply enhanced her existing capabilities, but Torres was describing something far more profound. The technology wasn't just connecting pilots to their aircraft. It was connecting them to environmental systems that operated beyond normal physical laws. Her conventional radar detected new contacts approaching from multiple directions. 6 additional aircraft, flying in formation patterns that indicated military origin but displayed no identifying transponder codes. They were approaching the installation with purpose, their flight characteristics suggesting they were also equipped with neural interface technology. Wake Island, Raven 1 detecting multiple aircraft converging on target area. Request identification and intent. General Hayes's voice carried new urgency. Raven, you need to reconnect your neural interface immediately. The approaching aircraft represent a significant threat to both the installation and our pilots currently in the area. The revelation hit her like cold water. This wasn't just a research operation. It was a contested situation involving multiple parties with advanced aircraft and competing interests in the installation's technology. The 3 missing American pilots weren't just test subjects. They were assets that someone else was attempting to secure or neutralize. Katerina watched the approaching aircraft through her conventional optics, noting flight characteristics that exceeded known performance parameters. They moved with the fluid precision of